Hello again, vinyl community. This is Matt, and this is my entry into the 10 Perfect Album Contest that's being run by Andy at Andy's Vinyl Den. This was to commemorate or celebrate his 200 subscribers. And so first of all, congratulations, Andy. I'm a recent subscriber, but I have been watching some of your videos before I subscribed. And yeah, I thought this would be kind of a fun contest, and it's a chance to show, for me to show some albums that I haven't shown before. So yeah, let's get to it. I think for those of you who've watched my videos before, most of these won't be too surprising, but maybe one or two will be, especially the last one. So again, just to kind of reiterate the rules of the contest. The idea was to show 10 perfect albums, or albums that you consider to be pretty much flawless from start to finish. So both side A and side B, side C and D, if it's a double album, that it's at a consistently high level all the way through. A couple of little rules here: no compilation albums, no greatest hits albums, and no live albums. So that actually did roll out a couple of possibilities for me, one in particular. But I get it. I mean, you can't have a live album because, well, that's really the same thing as a greatest hits album, right? I mean, a band's always going to play their best songs. So it's strictly studio albums. So that's cool. So let's get started. Okay, number one, Def Leppard Hysteria. But definitely one of my all-time favorite albums. Definitely for me one of the best albums of the 80s, and it's really a rock masterpiece. I think there's not one bad song on here. It has so many highlights, and from Love Bites to Animal, Rocket, Pour Some Sugar on Me. I mean, the list just goes on. And I first heard this album when I was about 9 or 10 years old. A friend of mine had it, and we went somewhere to like a park or somewhere with his mother and his sister, and yeah, he had a Walkman with him, and we were sat in the back of the car, and he played this on his Walkman, and you know, we were sharing headphones and whatever, and I was just blown away by it. Even at that age, I'd never heard anything quite like it, and since then I've had the album on CD twice actually. Once when I lived in England, and I have it on CD again. I have it on vinyl. I also have it on cassette. And it's just, again, what I was saying earlier about an album being consistently at a high level in order to be eligible for this contest. And for me, this absolutely is. It's just an amazing album. There's really no low points at all. Okay, next up, Warren Zevon, Excitable Boy. This is a really kind of a quirky, curious album in a way, but then again, Warren Zevon was a quirky, curious kind of guy. It has really a lot of terrific tracks on it. Of course, the obvious one is Werewolves of London. That was the big hit off the album. But the title track, Excitable Boy, is strangely disturbing when you listen to the lyrics, but it's a great song. We also got Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. That's a great track, and just consistently throughout the album, it's one of my favorite albums of the 70s, that's for sure. There's a few others, but this is definitely somewhere up there. Very consistent album. For me, it was easily his best album, but I know some people may have a different opinion on that. And yeah, Warren Zevon, Excitable Boy. Next up, this is a new purchase, but Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill. I've been wanting to buy this for some time on vinyl, finally did recently. I've had it on CD a couple of times, again, once in England when I lived in the UK, and again here in the US I have it on CD, now have it on vinyl. For me, it's easily one of the best albums of the 90s. One of the best albums ever by a female artist, and it's just it's an iconic album. What can you say? It's a rock classic. It just there's no bad songs on it. Every song tells a story, and the way a lot of the stories are woven is just masterful to me. It really is. Of course, Ironic was the big hit, and like Head Over Feet was a pretty big hit too. But songs like Perfect, talking about oppressive helicopter parents. Right Through You, of course, is another well-known track, and You Learn is one of my favorites on here as well. My absolute favorite track on here is probably Not the Doctor. I've always liked that for some reason. And this is another album that when I first heard it, I was just blown away by it. In the mid-90s, when it came out in 95, I bought the album on CD in England and just played it over and over. I was just floored by it. And to this day, it still impresses. Okay, so that was number 3. Album number 4, another recent purchase that I have shown recently in a previous video, but Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory. I had to include this. Again, I think this is one of the best albums of the 90s. Just a masterpiece of a Britpop album. It's sort of really when Britpop hit its height. Whether it was with this album or not is debatable, I guess, but for me, this is Oasis' best album. I know some people will debate that and say, no, it's definitely maybe it's their best album. And I understand that to an extent, because this deviated somewhat from their roots. This is a much more of a commercial sound. But there are so many amazing tracks in here, and again, I mean, it's just consistent throughout. We look at disc 1, you've got the likes of Roll With It, Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger. Then on disc 2, you've got the likes of Some Might Say, which was a big UK #1, She's Electric, which I always liked, and the iconic Champagne Supernova, which finishes off the album. Yeah, what more can you say? It's ridiculously strong from start to finish. Okay, next up, this is number 5. Simon and Garfunkel, Bookends. This is one of my favorite albums of all time, and for me, definitely one of the best albums of the 60s. I would put this in the top 3, which I realize puts it ahead of a lot of Beatles albums and so on, but I think this is just a masterpiece of an album. And it's also a great example of how great vinyl can sound compared to digital. You put this on, put on a pair of headphones and crank it up, and it just sounds amazing. You pick up so many little details that are distorted or muffled in the CD version. And again, it's ridiculously strong throughout. Of course, Mrs. Robinson was the big hit off the album. But, I mean, you've got Save the Life of My Child, which is one of my personal Simon & Garfunkel favorites. America, which is a really, I think, a little bit of an underrated song. It's almost a bit like a ballad, the way that the sort of slow, lulling nature of it, and I love the story that it tells. Of course, we've got the sort of strange track with the voices of the old folks speaking. But A Hazy Shade of Winter is on here too. Faking It, which I always thought was a little bit underrated. And again, it's just strong throughout, and it finishes with At the Zoo, which is just it's a quirky song, but it's a fun song. It's a great track, and just like all the other albums that I've shown so far, it's strong throughout, so I had to include it. Okay, next up we have Plastic Ono Band, John Lennon. To me, this is easily the best of Lennon's solo or non-Beatles work. In fact, I don't even think it's close, to be honest with you. And this is just definitely a masterpiece for me. It's up there with some of the best Beatles albums, and I think that it really it might even be the best album, the best post-Beatles or non-Beatles album out of any of the individual Beatles. So, better than any of McCartney's stuff or Harrison's solo stuff or Ringo Starr's solo stuff. I mean, you know, we start off with Mother, which is a great track. Really great way to start the album. Of course, it's got the legendary Working Class Hero on here. One of my personal favorites is Isolation. Oh, look at the back. That's cool. Picture of John as a kid. You have Hold On, Love, God. There's just so many excellent tracks on this album that I had to include it. I really did. Okay, next up, album number 7. Michael Jackson, Bad. I was a little torn between including this and Thriller. I almost went with Thriller, but the reason I chose Bad was for 2 reasons. One, this had more of an impact on my childhood. I don't remember Thriller being in the charts. I was around 5 years old when the album was released, whereas I was 8 years old when Bad came out. So I do remember this. In fact, I bought it on cassette when I was 8 years old. I still remember buying it. I was given money. I think it was some kind of a gift voucher or a gift card for a record store. And I remember going in there and looking through the cassettes and finding Bad. And in fact, I still have this on cassette now. And this to me, it probably doesn't quite hit the high points that Thriller does. Not quite. But it's more consistent. You know, Thriller for me, just there's a couple of places where it dips just a tiny bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Whereas Bad for me always sits right in that zone. Right, maybe, again, not quite hitting the highs of Thriller, but not quite hitting the lows of Thriller either. It's such a consistent album. Of course, the title track is excellent, but it has a legendary The Way You Make Me Feel. My personal favorite is I Just Can't Stop Loving You, which I think is just a beautiful song. And in fact, in the UK, that was the biggest hit on the album. That was a number 1. I think Bad got to number 1 as well. I think, but I won't swear to it. That may, you know what? Now that I think about it, I think Bad was number 2 in the UK. So I Just Can't Stop Loving You might have been the only UK number 1 that was on the album. Of course, a bunch of the others made the top 5 or the top 3, but what else can you say about it? We have Man in the Mirror. I mean, come on, it's just that alone. The CD version included a bonus track, Leave Me Alone, which I remember being in the charts. And it's a pretty good song. It's too bad that the vinyl version didn't include it. I was hoping that they would maybe sneak it in. This is a more recent repressing. I was hoping for the repressings that they would maybe put Leave Me Alone on there, but they didn't, which I understand. I guess they're keeping it true to the original track listing. So I guess I kind of get that. Okay, number 8. We have to have a Beatles album. We have to. They're my favorite band of all time. And it is Abbey Road. Now, Abbey Road is actually not my favorite Beatles album. My favorite Beatles album is the White Album. But this is their most complete and their most polished album. Definitely. The White Album, for me, has, it goes way up there. It sets the bar really high. It's got some real high points. Helter Skelter, Bomb My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness Is a Warm Gun, and several other songs. But it also has a couple of real low points. Revolution 9. And Abbey Road just never gets to those low points. It's just solid, you know. For me, Abbey Road is like a 9 out of 10 throughout. The White Album hits 10 out of 10 a few times, but it also hits like 3 out of 10 a few times as well. And so for this reason, this is my third favorite Beatles album. My second favorite is Revolver, but again, I actually don't think Revolver is quite as consistent as this. There are 1 or 2 tracks on Revolver that I could kind of take them or leave them. And that's not true of Abbey Road. Abbey Road is just really a masterpiece throughout. What more can you say about it? Okay, and album number 9. This is another recent purchase. Pink Floyd, The Division Bell. I know I talked about this in a recent video, but this is my favorite Pink Floyd album, which is a little sacrilegious. I know. Dark Side of the Moon. I know The Wall. Wish You Were Here. I get it. But I didn't grow up with any of those other albums. I did grow up listening to this. I was 15 when this came out. The only other Pink Floyd album that I would have been old enough to remember, aside from any live albums, would have been A Momentary Lapse of Reason. I was 8 when that came out, but I don't remember it. I wasn't into Pink Floyd back then. I liked chart pop music, whereas I do remember this coming out, and I had this on CD. I remember ripping it from CD onto mini disc, which was great. I could take it with me, and it was basically CD quality. I could take it with me on the train or walking around or whatever. And for some reason, I've always loved this album. I just think it's so consistent. I think it's so underrated. It got a little bit of a bad rap when it was released, some bad reviews, and I think that was totally unfair. It's some of the songs are very intricate, very well done. A lot of the little embellishments, the sound effects, and a lot of people will disagree with me. And like I said, there's a good case to be made for several Floyd albums to be the best Floyd album. This is just my personal favorite. It's just my opinion. And again, like the other albums, it's just so solid throughout. You've got Coming Back to Life, Lost for Words, Keep Talking, A Great Day for Freedom. It just has so many, again, really underrated tracks on it, consistent throughout. I had to include it. Okay, finally, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball here, because all of the albums I've shown so far have been rock, except maybe Simon and Garfunkel, but okay, even that's sort of folksy rock, right? Don't laugh. Boney M, Knife Light to Venus. I wanted to include this because, it's not like it's going to make my top 5 or top 10 favorite albums of all time. It's not. But what it is consistent, and it's really good. It is good. If you want a solid disco album, because that's really what it is. The songs are pretty much disco for the most part, pop disco. And it's amazingly consistent. Of course, the big, huge hit on here was Rivers of Babylon. Massive hit. Big hit in the UK. I'm just going to open this out for a second, because I always like the gatefold. It's kind of cool. I always like the back of it too, with the ladder right there. But we also have Brown Girl in the Ring, which was the B-side to Rivers of Babylon. We've got 2 excellent cover versions. Heart of Gold, Neil Young song, of course, and King of the Road, Roger Miller track. King of the Road in particular is excellent. It's got a great sort of poppy disco beat to it. Stick it on your turntable, crank the volume up. It's really, really good. We also have Rasputin, which was a pretty big hit. The title track, Night Flight to Venus, is also good. Great beat, really good beat to it. And Voodoo Night as well. And it's just, again, really consistent. And just to throw a little curveball, I wanted to include a kind of pop disco album in here. I don't listen to it very often. Maybe I should. It's pretty good. Okay, so that's my top 10. I wanted to show you a few albums that almost made the cut, just missed out for one reason or another. And really, several of these could have easily been in the top 10. I really enjoyed making this video because there were so many albums to choose from. I'm sure there are a bunch more in my collection here that I could have considered including. But okay, Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder, phenomenal album. Excuse me. A lot of great tracks on it. It really came close. It really did. Billy Joel, The Stranger, one of my favorite Billy Joel albums. Although I do like An Innocent Man as well, but this is just an iconic album. Everything from the cover to the quality of the tracks on it. Again, it's really, really consistent, and it was close. It was. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Objectively, this is probably the best Pink Floyd album, and even I realize that. It's just that I personally prefer the Division Bell. Nothing against Dark Side. Dark Side's iconic. I'm not trying to diss it. It's an amazing album, but just I just want to be a bit different with the Division Bell. Paul Simon, Graceland. I didn't include Graceland because I had already included Bookends, which was Simon and Garfunkel, and I could only pick 10 albums. But this is probably my favorite Paul Simon album. Michael Jackson, Thriller. I mentioned this earlier. Almost included it. I went with Bad instead for the reasons I already mentioned. Led Zeppelin 4. I was going to include this, but Andy included it in his own personal list. So I figured, well, I don't want to kind of, be copying him, I guess. So I didn't include it, but ordinarily it probably would have made my top 10. I considered including Led Zeppelin 2 as well, but I don't think it's quite as good as Led Zeppelin 4. And finally, the last album that just missed the cut was Eagles' Hotel California. This is one of my favorite albums of all time, but mostly because of the strength of Side A. I think Side B is just not quite as strong, even though it is good. It is. And so because of that, I thought, for me personally, it doesn't quite meet the rules of the competition by being sort of perfect consistently throughout. So it just missed the cut. But the title track, Hotel California, that is one of my favorite songs of all time. Okay, guys, so that's it. Thank you for watching. Again, Andy, congratulations on the 200 subs. That's really terrific. Hopefully one day I'll get there. I think last count I had 60 something, so still a ways to go to catch up to you. Thank you for running the contest. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what other people post. I have watched one or two other videos, one or two other submission videos, so I'll be looking for some more. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.